Anton Marini, and we're going to show you some development work that we've been doing for mobile devices. And so we'll start with this, Mrmr, Dynamic Interfaces for Mobile Devices. Dynamic interfaces for mobile devices. What does that mean? This is one of the hardest projects I've ever been working on to try and explain to people, mostly because the idea of a user interface is usually linked with the application that it's associated with. So, for instance, an interface like Photoshop. Photoshop is its interface and vice versa. It's hard for people to conceptualize the idea of a user interface in a vacuum, or a user interface that isn't necessarily associated with a given application. But let's take, if we look at a big sprawling application like Photoshop that has an intense user interface, and we try and think about how would you create an interface for the functionality of Photoshop on a mobile device. So by mobile device, I mean this new breed of smartphones, like this is an iPod, but you can take the Nokia N810 or a variety of other Palm-based devices that qualify. And so we want to have a Photoshop interface on a mobile device, let's say. How are we going to do that? Well, for one thing, we certainly don't want all of the functionality of Photoshop exposed. You want just a couple of things exposed that correspond to what you want to do at any given moment. And then when your needs change, you want that interface to change with you. Well, that's what Mrmr does. That's what the project's about. It's creating a just-in-time interface that's pushed to the mobile device by the application. So how are we going to do that? Well, first we need to find an application for it. You need a scenario. Some sort of interactive situation where you want users to contribute data in some way from the devices they already have, not one that you give them necessarily. So what we have to do is create a protocol to do that. And the protocol looks like that. It's pretty geeky, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But basically, this is an entire interface, what you're looking at here. And each of these lines is one command that tells a Mrmr-compliant device, something that understands the protocol, to create an interface widget, a UI widget, a push button, a slider, a variety of different things that everyone is familiar with, but perhaps not by name. And so this pushes these out as single messages sent over either UDP or TCP, depending on what you broadcast, what you advertise the service as being as accepting. And when all these packets of data get into the client, you will have a user interface. So specifically, what you have is, this is one of these lines down here, and it consists of a variety of different things. You have to specify a namespace, the type of user interface widget you're creating, some authentication and protocol stuff, and then its position within the screen. It's going to be relatively positioned so that you can use the same command on a variety of different screen sizes and resolutions. And then a label to identify it. So that's enough of that for the moment. What I'd like to present is some scenarios. So, for instance, let's say that you want to have some sort of kiosk or billboard, and you want people passing by to be able to interact with that. You want to be able to send a user interface to their device. In a museum, either an interactive exhibit or just something. Most of us have been to museums where you can rent one of these special devices, and there's some sort of infrared system where when you go to each room, it pipes audio to you, things like that. Why not have that just running on your mobile phone instead of having a special device? Well, that's what you would use Mrmr for. Or Anton and I come from the live video, live audio scene. We met at another gathering, not dissimilar from Dorkbot, called Share, which means every week in the East Village. And so we develop a lot of interactive video and interactive audio systems. And as a way to show you how you would implement Mrmr, we're going to take a look at something that Anton has recently done. And we're just going to move over to his computer right here. So this is a Quartz Composer patch, and maybe I should let you...
Oh, hello. So My name's Anton, and I do a lot of real-time video, VJing kind of stuff. And I was interested in implementing to start implementing a simulator for an old type of analog video synthesizer known as a Rudetra that did some pretty cool things that you don't really see anymore. And so I have a little Quartz Composer patch, which is a patching environment, boxes and lines, and it lets you work with real-time video and 3D. And this is a scenario where I might want to use a mobile device. When I perform, I'm very often kind of stuck behind the keyboard. And that's okay for a while, but it gets a little boring. Maybe I want to get out and dance. It'd be cool if I could control my visuals from the dance floor, or I could have more than one person control the visuals, or if I were doing, audio stuff, maybe have someone being able to talk to my system. So this is something that I was kind of working alongside with Eric. We share kind of the same office space, and we decided we wanted to try to implement Mrmr with this, because I've got a bunch of sliders and buttons here that do different things. This is a 3D, it's a pretty basic 3D kind of an effect, but we have some other fun things we can do. We have feedback on the effect and blurs and all sorts of other fun things that we can do in 3D. But that's not the point right now. The point is that I want to control this interface with Mrmr. I want to build an interface on my iPod Touch or Android platform or whatever it is, so I can control my interface in real time.
So the first step is to look at his project here and to figure out what are the elements that you want to be able to control. And so we decided that for a Mrmr prototype, we wanted to control the rotation of this 3D object. We actually made a list. We sat down and made a grocery list. Mm-hmm. So what did we decide? We wanted that. We wanted 2 push buttons, one to turn the wireframe on and off.
The Z extrusion, the feedback amount, the amount of smoothing on the points in 3D space, whether or not we have a wireframe mode, so I can kind of turn off this wireframe doodad that kind of looks like video scan lines from old analog television sets. And what was the other one? Oh, the blend mode that I didn't write down. But that's that.
Okay, so to create that interface, we know what we want, and we could write, using the Mrmr protocol, we could write these commands by hand and use some sort of TCP client. You can write that in 5 lines of Perl, I think, to initiate a socket connection, send the data packet, or iChat, or different things that send packets over the network. And that's certainly a valid way to do it. What I did, just for my own testing, is I created a sort of emulator, and it's really rudimentary. It was put together rather quickly, so it's not something that I would use long term, but it shows you basically how this thing would work. So we have some interface widgets that we can use here. So I'm going to start out, and I'm going to say I want a slider. And this is all relative positioning. So I'm going to say in a grid, a theoretical grid that's 4 columns by 4 rows, I want in column 1, row 1, a slider with the name extrude. Extrude, yeah. So there's my slider. Okay, that's not exactly what I wanted. I wanted call span to be 4, and so forth. And I'll just build one more. This will be called feedback. Feedback. So all this little application is doing is creating these 2 little lines right here. That's what's important. Those are the commands. So I'm going to, in my little application, I can save interfaces. So to save time, I'm going to load the interface that we came up with just before the meeting today. So it's not quite positioned exactly the way I would want it. This doesn't show up really well on the screen. We're calling it a tactile zone. It's basically a portion of the screen that you can use as a touch screen, and you can create as many of those as you want. So instead of having one set of X and Y values across the entire surface of the device, you can break that into multiple discrete areas. So we have exactly what we talked about, these 4 sliders, 2 buttons, one labeled wireframe and one blend, and this tactile zone. So now that we've created an interface, we need to get it onto the device. So using one of these seemingly magic technology. It's called zero config. Apple implements it under the name of Bonjour. It's a way for different applications to advertise their services on a network so that essentially things can talk to each other without configuration, without network configuration. So I've implemented that such that when someone turns on a Mrmr client, and I've written one for the iPod, it looks like this. Sorry about the video feedback. So this is going to be really hard to see. Anyway, it's one of these little guys on here, and I'm going to launch it. And when it's launched, you have 4 options. You can have a new, I'll just explain. You have a new user interface. You can load a saved one. You can